Picture this. You're sinking into a world where sunlight dies, pressure hugs like an overenthusiastic sumo wrestler, and food falls from the sky like cosmic crumbs. And yet, down there in the cold, silent dark, creatures don't shrink to survive. They grow. They stretch into giants longer than buses, wider than dinner tables, and stranger than anything evolution ever sketched in the daylight. Why? Because the deep sea flips every rule of biology on its head. Scarcity becomes strength. Pressure becomes protection. Longevity becomes a growth plan. And isolation, that's evolution's blank page to doodle the weirdest life forms imaginable. By the end of this dive, you'll understand why the most hostile place on Earth is also its biggest factory for giants, and why the abyss turns darkness, emptiness, and crushing force into the perfect recipe for creatures too enormous to exist anywhere else. Grab your metaphorical flashlight. We're heading into a world where the deeper you go, the bigger things get. Imagine sinking through the ocean as if gravity itself has decided to take a personal day. Above you, the sunlight fizzles out like a cheap flashlight. And suddenly you're suspended in a world where darkness is the default setting. There is no horizon, no sky, no up or down, just a slow descent into a place so alien it might as well be tax-exempt from the laws of normal biology. Somewhere between that final blink of sunlight and the pitch-black silence, the ocean begins to feel less like a place and more like a different planet. And on that planet, the locals have, well, a habit of being enormous. Not big for their age, enormous. More like, who approved this blueprint? Enormous. As you fall deeper, the water presses in on you with all the enthusiasm of a sumo wrestler who has decided you are the world's last sandwich. Every 10 meters is another atmosphere of pressure, which means the deep sea doesn't just squeeze, it clings. Objects that look perfectly normal near the surface behave like they've made poor life choices the lower they go. Yet down here, in an environment that could crush steel like it's a soda can with self-esteem issues, animals thrive. Not only thrive, some grow to sizes that feel borderline disrespectful to our understanding of physics. If you've ever seen a deep-sea isopod, a creature that looks like a roly-poly bug but scaled up to the size of a loaf of bread, you know the first instinct is to ask, why? The second instinct is usually, should I run? But running is pointless, because down here everything moves in slow motion, including your panic. And the more you learn about the deep sea, the more you realize that the question, why is it so huge, applies to far more than one overachieving crustacean. Giant squids longer than school buses, jellyfish the size of compact cars, worms as long as a city street. They all lurk in the abyss like characters in some mythological fever dream. Here's the twist. No one really prepared us for this. The ocean surface seems friendly. Waves, sunshine, seagulls who think your sandwich is a communal offering. But the deeper you go, the stranger things become. It is almost as though evolution finally found a place where it could experiment freely, without judgment, and immediately decided, let's make everything unnecessarily large. It's not subtle about it either. The deep sea is practically a gallery of gigantism, like an art museum where every exhibit is labeled What happens when nature has too much free time? But the mystery isn't just that these creatures are big. It's that they are big down here, in a place where nothing about life seems easy. There's barely any light, almost no food, temperatures that hover just above freezing, and the constant pressure of several skyscrapers stacked on top of each other. You'd think creatures would get smaller out of sheer practicality, like travelers trying to cram their lives into a carry-on. Instead, they double down and go full, let's become a multi-meter-long monster noodle. So you may be wondering, is gigantism some kind of weird evolutionary dare? Did one creature start it, and everyone else just politely followed the trend? Or is there something more fundamental happening beneath the waves, something so deeply baked into the physics of the ocean that being big becomes not just possible, but beneficial? It's tempting to imagine a council of ancient sea creatures gathering in a dark trench, deciding that bigger is better because it makes for excellent intimidation. But the truth, as always, is stranger and more scientific. The first time humans encountered these giants, it didn't go well. Sailors wrote dramatic accounts of sea serpents longer than entire ships. Fishermen found tentacles on beaches big enough to slap a grown man unconscious. Early explorers hauled up deep-sea creatures so large and strange that scientists spent entire evenings considering whether the ocean was simply trolling us. Even today, we catch glimpses of enormous silhouettes passing beneath submersibles, shadows so big that the camera operators start whispering as though the darkness has ears. And yet, in the grand scheme of things, we barely know anything about the deep sea. Most of it is unexplored, not in the poetic sense, but in the literal. We have better maps of Mars than our own ocean floor sense. Every time we lower a camera or send a remotely operated vehicle into the abyss, we find something new. Sometimes it's a species nobody has ever seen. Other times it's a creature that already exists in textbooks, but casually reveals it can grow 5 times larger than anyone assumed. The deep sea loves surprises, and by surprises I mean it loves making scientists question their career decisions. As you continue this imaginary descent, the water becomes so dark that your brain starts inventing colors. Shapes appear and vanish in the distance, as if the darkness itself is shifting. You feel surrounded by something vast and patient, something that has been growing, evolving, and expanding long before humans ever figured out how to stand upright. Down here, gigantism isn't an oddity. It's a pattern. It's a clue. It's a biological signature scrawled across the entire abyss. And this is where our story begins, not with answers, but with a question that has baffled scientists for over a century. Why does the deep sea create giants? What is it about this silent crushing, frozen darkness that encourages life not just to survive, but to grow beyond anything we ever expected? Welcome to the mystery. Now let's dive deeper. The deeper you travel into the ocean, the more pressure becomes less of an environmental detail and more of a personal vendetta. Down here, pressure is not the quiet, underlying force we casually mention in physics class. This pressure is ambitious. It wants to compress, flatten, squeeze, and fold anything that dares to wander too far from the surface. Imagine the atmosphere above your head multiplied again and again with every 10 meters downward, until the weight of it all becomes so intense it could turn an ordinary object into a new and regrettable geometric shape. Yet the creatures that live here seem unbothered. If anything, they behave like the pressure is just another house guest that never leaves, but eventually blends into the background. To understand why big bodies are such a good deal in this crushing world, you first need to imagine how pressure behaves. It does not gently tap on the door of biology. It barges in without knocking. It surrounds organisms from all directions simultaneously, pushing inward with the enthusiasm of a toddler hugging a balloon. Most surface animals would implode within seconds, but deep-sea creatures? They treat pressure the same way a seasoned commuter treats rush hour traffic. Annoying maybe, but nothing worth raising an eyebrow over. This is because evolution has equipped them with bodies that don't fight pressure. They cooperate with it. Soft tissues, gels, and elastic structures dominate the deep, making creatures more sponge than skeleton. If you've ever watched a slow-motion video of a stress ball being squished, congratulations. You have unknowingly previewed the life philosophy of deep-sea anatomy. Bones, where present, are sometimes so flexible you'd swear they were designed by an overly cautious engineer. These creatures don't crack under pressure because their skeletons behave like stress balls that have seen too much but refuse to retire. Now here's where size enters the picture. Larger bodies distribute pressure differently. Imagine squeezing a marble versus squeezing a beach ball. One resists with all its tiny might, while the other just politely reshapes itself and continues being a beach ball. Deep-sea giants follow the beach ball model. Their bodies are big enough that pressure has room to spread out across tissues, reducing localized stress. In a world where pressure never lets up, being large provides a kind of structural calm, like widening a bridge to prevent traffic jams. It is not about being strong. It is about not giving pressure anything specific to break. But size alone is not the trick. What makes deep-sea giants especially pressure-proof is the internal consistency of their bodies. Many have no air-filled spaces at all, no lungs, no swim bladders, nothing that could collapse under the weight. Air pockets are the divas of anatomy. They demand stable conditions and absolutely refuse to cooperate with high-pressure environments. So deep-sea organisms simply do not bother with pockets of air. Their bodies are filled with water, gels, and tissues that are already nearly incompressible, which means pressure has nothing dramatic to ruin. Being larger also helps maintain internal chemical stability. Pressure tampers with molecules, nudges proteins into different shapes, and can even mess with enzyme function. But large bodies dilute these effects by providing more internal volume for chemical processes to unfold peacefully. It is like hosting a dance party in a gym rather than a closet. Everything has more room to move without crashing into the walls. The bigger the organism, the easier it becomes to maintain equilibrium in a world that is always pushing inward. One of the strangest results of all this is the way motion works in the deep sea. The bigger the body, the more gracefully it moves through the water. Instead of tiny creatures fighting every wave and current like panicked swimmers, large organisms simply glide. Their mass works in their favor. It creates a type of momentum that pressure cannot easily disrupt, as though evolution gifted them the underwater equivalent of cruise control. Then there is the matter of shape. Deep-sea giants rarely look symmetrical in the traditional classroom diagram sense. Their bodies are elongated, rounded, or ribbon-like, all designed to reduce pressure points. If you examine them closely, they seem sculpted specifically to deal with a universe that is always trying to shrink them. Some resemble inflated ghosts. Others look like someone stretched a creature to see how far it could go before complaining. Yet every bizarre contour exists for a reason: to keep pressure from winning. This leads to a remarkable outcome. In a place where pressure rules with absolute authority, larger organisms actually gain a sense of freedom. Their bodies allow them to move, hunt, and exist without constantly battling collapse. They become the calmest things in a very unfriendly environment, floating through darkness with a kind of slow-motion dignity. Pressure stops being a threat and becomes a consistent backdrop, an environmental constant they have mastered so thoroughly it becomes boring. Which brings us back to the heart of the mystery. Gigantism in the deep sea is not just a quirk. It is a structural response to a world shaped entirely by pressure. In a place where everything is being squeezed, the giants are the ones who figured out how to make that squeeze irrelevant. Their size is not arrogance. It is adaptation. The bigger they become, the less the pressure bothers them, and the more comfortably they can exist in a realm where nearly everything else would collapse, crack, or regret coming here in the first place. So yes, the deep sea may crush submarines, distort metal, and terrify explorers, but the giants drifting through it? They just keep growing, flexing their stress ball bones, and swimming through the dark like they own the place. If the deep sea had a Yelp page, the first review would almost definitely complain about the food. Not the flavor, not the portion size, just the simple fact that there is almost never any. The abyss is the universe's strictest diet plan, where the menu is a combination of whatever drifts down from above and whoever swims too close. This is an environment where a single morsel can feel like a Michelin-starred event, so the creatures that inhabit it have learned to treat every meal like a rare celestial alignment. And strangely enough, one of the best survival strategies in this cosmic buffet of scarcity is to get bigger. At first, that sounds backwards. On land, the animals with the biggest bodies usually need the biggest meals. A blue whale eats more krill than a vacuum cleaner eats breadcrumbs. An elephant spends most of its day shoving plants into its mouth like it has a personal vendetta against leaves. Big bodies usually mean big appetites. But the deep sea changes that logic the same way it changes sunlight, temperature, and the meaning of the word normal. Down here, bigger bodies can actually make it easier to eat, easier to survive, and easier to stretch the time between meals in ways that would make a desert cactus jealous. Imagine drifting across a dark seafloor that stretches out like an abandoned planet. Nothing moves unless it must. Nothing flickers unless it is absolutely forced to. Every creature's metabolism is the biological equivalent of a power-saving mode. Food falls from above in tiny fragments, bits of dead plankton, stray fish parts, drifting flakes of decomposed something or other. This magical sprinkle of organic debris is politely named marine snow, though that phrase makes it sound far more romantic than the reality, which is essentially a never-ending drizzle of ocean dandruff. And even that beautiful imagery fades the deeper you go, because the snow thins out until the abyss becomes almost completely foodless. So how can a giant survive here? By turning size into a feeding strategy. A big body means a big reach. It means longer appendages to sweep across the water, wider mouths to catch whatever drifts by, and a much larger feeding radius. In a world where food doesn't politely approach you, the next best option is to become a living net. Picture a creature cruising slowly through the dark, its arms or feelers drifting outward like curtains in zero gravity. Every inch counts. Every extra bit of surface area becomes a chance to grab something edible. At this scale, feeding becomes less about precision and more about presence. Big creatures win simply by existing in more space at once. Some deep-sea giants feed with a method so slow and steady it almost feels philosophical. Imagine being a predator that moves at the speed of an overly cautious shopping cart. Yet somehow, this pace works. Slow movement means the least possible wasted energy. It reduces the risk of overshooting food. It lets creatures drift through nutrient-poor water and collect what little it offers, like a vacuum cleaner operating in half speed, but still managing to pull in dust from every corner. These are slow-motion vacuum cleaners with an attitude, not frantic, not rushed, just determined to gather whatever exists in their path. Others take advantage of their size by storing vast amounts of food when they do find something worth eating. When a whale carcass falls to the sea floor, for example, the event is nothing short of a deep-sea feast day. Large scavengers swarm toward the giant buffet table, and their bodies allow them to gorge until they resemble overstuffed piñatas of protein and success. Some can store the calories for months, slowly converting them into energy with the precision of meticulous accountants. When meals are this rare, storage becomes survival. Bigger bodies can also support more complex feeding strategies. A tiny creature cannot afford a mouth shaped like an elaborate scoop. A tiny creature cannot drag around a net of tendrils longer than a city bus. But a giant? A giant can turn its entire anatomy into a specialized eating machine. Some species grow extravagant feeding arms that unfurl like banners in the dark. Others widen their mouths until they resemble living funnels. Some even develop chemical lures powerful enough to bait prey into approaching voluntarily. If you ever wanted proof that the deep sea has no problem bending the rules of normal biology, just look at a giant that hunts by glowing like an underwater neon sign advertising free snacks. Large size also helps when hunting moving prey. Tiny predators must chase, dart, and lunge, activities far too energetic for the deep sea's frugal energy economy. But a large predator can end the same chase simply by opening its mouth wider. Being big means your dinner accidentally swims into danger more often than not. A creature with a mouth the size of a backpack does not need athleticism. It needs patience and the quiet confidence of someone who knows food will eventually wander in. Even the ability to move across large distances becomes valuable. Small animals often deal with patchy food by relying on luck. Large animals can go looking. Their bodies act like built-in gas tanks, holding enough energy for long journeys through barren territory. It is the marine equivalent of owning a car with an enormous fuel tank in a desert full of abandoned gas stations. So, in the deep sea, gigantism becomes the solution to a problem that seems impossible: how to eat in a place where eating opportunities are almost non-existent. Big creatures claim more space, collect more food, store more energy, and hunt with strategies unavailable to smaller animals. They survive not through abundance, but through efficiency. Giants shaped by scarcity, turning the deep ocean's silent emptiness into their own strange advantage. In a world where dinner is a rare miracle, size becomes the best tool evolution can offer. And so the giants glide on, slow and patient, vacuuming the darkness with quiet confidence and just a hint of attitude. The deeper you descend, the colder the world becomes. Not the kind of cold that makes you reach for a jacket, but the kind that makes you feel as though the ocean is politely trying to preserve you for future generations. Down here, temperatures hover just above freezing. It is a cold so consistent and stubborn that it shapes everything living in the abyss. The deep sea does not do warm breezes or tropical afternoons. It does perpetual winter. And in this eternal chill, giant creatures not only endure, but thrive, moving with the slow, deliberate grace of refrigerators that learn to swim. Cold water changes the rules of survival in ways that would confuse any land animal. On the surface, warm temperatures speed up biological processes. Hearts beat faster, muscles fire quicker, and metabolisms roar along like overworked engines. But in the deep sea, cold does the opposite. It presses the biological pause button. Chemical reactions slow. Enzymes behave like they are half asleep. Metabolisms glide along at a rate that makes sloths seem like hyperactive athletes. Every molecule in a deep-sea creature's body seems to have agreed to work the night shift, but at the slowest possible pace. This slowdown is not a flaw. It is the secret sauce. Because in a place where energy is rare, where meals may be months apart, and movement must be carefully rationed, a slow metabolism is the biological equivalent of having a long-term savings plan. It means a creature can stretch the calories from one unlucky passing snack into days or weeks of survival. Energy does not burst out in frantic motions. It drips out efficiently and methodically, like a leaky faucet that somehow benefits the entire household. This is where gigantism slips in like an unexpected bonus prize. Being large in cold water can actually help animals conserve energy. Large bodies have a lower surface area to volume ratio, meaning they lose heat more slowly. Even though the water is freezing, the creature's body becomes its own thermal blanket. Heat stays in, energy stays in, life stays steady. A small animal in the same environment would lose heat faster than it could earn it, like trying to warm a mansion with a single candle. A giant animal, however, holds on to warmth with the stubbornness of someone who refuses to give up their spot by the fireplace. But heat retention is just the beginning. Cold water also thickens. It becomes denser, heavier, more resistant to movement. For land animals, moving through molasses would be a nightmare. For deep-sea giants, it becomes part of the dance. Their enormous bodies glide through dense water more efficiently than small ones can. They generate long, slow motions that carry them forward with surprising elegance, conserving energy with every sweep of a fin or undulation of a tentacle. Their size allows them to harness the stiffness of cold water instead of fighting it, turning each movement into a low-cost glide instead of a high-cost sprint. Cold also affects how creatures handle oxygen. In frigid water, oxygen dissolves better, saturating the environment with more of it than warm waters usually hold. And since metabolic rates are slow, the oxygen demand is equally low. It is as though the deep sea provides a quiet, chill environment where everyone breathes deeply, slowly, and economically. Big bodies can store more oxygen in their tissues, letting them operate like walking oxygen banks, slow, steady, and reliable. If a warm water fish tried to live down here, it would panic within minutes. Its oxygen needs skyrocketing as it tried to stay warm. A deep-sea giant, meanwhile, floats calmly through the cold as though it has been practicing meditation for a century. One of the strangest and most wonderful things about cold water gigantism is how it changes the pace of life. In the deep sea, growth can take decades. Development is a marathon where even the finish line takes its time arriving. Instead of rushing through life stages like many surface animals do, deep-sea giants expand slowly, building enormous bodies through patience rather than speed. It is not unusual for them to remain in juvenile phases for years, slowly accumulating cells and tissues with the deliberate focus of someone assembling a puzzle without the picture on the box. This slow pace also grants them stability. Cold water discourages sudden changes. There are no heat waves or cold snaps, no daily temperature swings, no seasonal drama. Life in the abyss unfolds in a monotone rhythm, steady as a heartbeat at rest. Giants flourish in that stability because every part of their biology thrives on consistency. Their metabolisms do not need to accelerate or decelerate. Their tissues adapt to one temperature and stick with it. Their entire existence becomes a smooth, uninterrupted flow, like a documentary filmed on half speed. And while the cold slows life down, it also reduces biological costs. Muscles do not need to generate bursts of sudden power. Organs do not need to constantly adjust. Everything from digestion to movement happens with the efficiency of a finely tuned machine running at minimum settings. And when a creature is enormous, covering more ground with fewer motions becomes essential. A giant who burns energy slowly is a giant who survives. which leads to the final curiosity. In this frozen world, being big does not mean being fierce or fast. It means being frugal. It means making every calorie count. It means letting cold water and slow metabolism become the quiet architects of size. So these giants drift through the darkness, conserving energy like biological accountants, storing heat like mobile thermoses, gliding as though the ocean itself carries them along. Down here, cold is not the enemy. It is the sculptor, and the giants are its masterpieces, majestic, efficient, and moving with the chilly grace of refrigerators that learn to swim. As the ocean deepens into shadow and silence, something unexpected happens to the water itself. Far from the chaotic, wave-tossed surface where light and warmth play, the deep becomes a vault of cool, oxygen-rich water. It is one of the ocean's quiet contradictions, a place starved of sunlight and food, yet flush with the very element that fuels life's inner engines. The deeper currents deliver oxygen with the reliability of a night train that never misses its schedule, and this hidden surplus becomes a powerful ally for the giants drifting in the abyss. To understand why oxygen matters so much, picture the role it plays inside an animal's body. Oxygen is the reason cells wake up in the morning and get to work. It is the spark plug of metabolism, the match that lights the furnace. Every muscle contraction, every digestive effort, every flick of a fin depends on it. But for surface organisms, oxygen availability can shift with temperature, salinity, and seasonal changes. In contrast, the deep sea is practically a library of chemical stability, its shelves stacked with cold, dense, oxygen-heavy water, waiting patiently for anything living to breathe it in. This abundance is the perfect match for large bodies. Bigger animals need more oxygen overall, of course, but what matters is how efficiently they can use it. In cold, oxygen-rich waters, their tissues stay well supplied, like factories that never worry about running out of fuel. A giant organism living in these depths can carry out slow, powerful metabolic processes without hitting the biological equivalent of a power outage. Oxygen becomes their silent partner, flowing into their systems as steadily as deep currents sweep across the seafloor. Even for creatures that do not have lungs, like most deep-sea residents, the principle remains the same. They rely on gills, membranes, or entire networks of microscopic structures that extract oxygen from water, with a level of commitment normally found in baristas during morning rush. These respiratory surfaces become astonishingly efficient, capturing the dissolved oxygen that saturates the deep. And because the water is cold enough to hold more oxygen per cubic inch than warm surface water ever could, even a slow, deliberate swipe of water across a gill can deliver a satisfying haul of breathable goodness. The key advantage for giants lies in how they distribute that oxygen internally. Large organisms can build extensive networks of blood vessels circulating oxygen in wide, slow loops. These transportation systems do not need to rush. They simply need to keep moving. In the dim blue-black of the deep ocean, every beat of a heart no matter how faint, pushes oxygen into tissues with remarkable consistency. Blood flows like a languid river, delivering what each cell needs without wasting energy on frantic pumping. It is the ocean's version of a public transit system that actually works. This consistent oxygen supply also helps muscles develop in ways that would be impossible in more oxygen-poor environments. While surface predators often rely on explosive bursts of speed, deep-sea giants lean toward endurance. Their muscles are built for long glides, slow ascents, and steady pulses of movement. And because oxygen feeds these muscles without interruption, the animals rarely face the sudden fatigue that haunts many surface species. Their strength is measured in silence and duration, not speed. Imagine powering a cross-ocean road trip using nothing but a single, unhurried engine. No sputtering, no overheating, just smooth, reliable travel. Some of the largest deep-sea scavengers owe their survival to this oxygen advantage. When they locate a rare feast, they can consume and digest enormous amounts of food over long stretches of time. Digestion takes energy, and energy demands oxygen. The deep's oxygen wealth gives them the metabolic support to break down meals slowly and thoroughly, converting nutrients into usable energy with all the efficiency of a machine that has been fine-tuned for centuries. Interestingly, oxygen-rich deep waters are also essential for maintaining certain pigments, enzymes, and internal chemical reactions that giants depend on. These reactions often proceed slowly due to low temperatures, but the steady presence of oxygen ensures they do not stall. It is a quiet collaboration, cold slowing things down, oxygen keeping things functional, that allows these creatures to thrive in a world that feels both frozen and infinite. Oxygen even influences how these giants rest. Many deep-sea animals lack a true sleep cycle, instead drifting between periods of lowered activity. The constant supply of oxygen supports these long, restful states. With no threats looming from predators who depend on vision or speed, giants can pause their physical efforts and simply exist. Their bodies settle into a peaceful metabolic hum, a kind of biological stillness that the deep sea seems designed to nurture. In this environment, size stops being a liability and becomes an elegant match for the chemistry around it. Big bodies have big demands, but the deep offers exactly what they need, not through abundance of food, not through warmth, but through oxygen delivered in cold, patient currents. The relationship is almost poetic. The ocean gives them breath, and they, in turn, fill its silent realms with the gentle sweep of immense forms passing through the dark. So while the surface teems with creatures gasping for survival, the deep sea houses giants whose respiratory efficiency is the quiet backbone of their existence. Down here, oxygen is not just a molecule. It is the reason the shadows keep moving, the reason massive hearts beat slow and steady, and the reason evolution felt confident enough to paint the abyss with such enormous strokes. If time feels slow to you on a Monday morning, imagine living in the deep sea, where time does not move so much as it drifts. Down here, years pass with the subtlety of dust settling on a bookshelf. Life unfolds at a pace so unhurried it would make a tortoise look like it is training for a triathlon. And in this strange, patient world, one of the most powerful forces shaping gigantism is simply that deep-sea creatures live for an incredibly, almost comically long time. They age so gradually that if you asked one about its birthday, it would probably stare blankly and wonder what century you meant. Longevity in the deep ocean is not a luxury, nor is it an accident. It is a fundamental part of the ecosystem. Everything about the abyss encourages slowness, slow development, slow movements, slow metabolic change, and incredibly slow biological aging. In this cradle of perpetual delay, life stretches out not in decades, but sometimes in centuries. Certain rockfish in the deep can surpass 200 years. Some deep-sea clams have been found older than entire modern countries. And there are sharks quietly cruising the darkness with lifespans that make human history look like a brief commercial break. When organisms live this long, evolution gains an unusual playground. Long-lived species accumulate bodily changes over extended periods, allowing growth patterns that simply are not possible in fast-living creatures. Imagine sculpting a statue, but instead of shaping it over days, you get a millennium. Every cell division, every slow addition of tissue, stacks up on a timeline so generous it practically begs for enormity. The deep sea gives evolution time, oceans of it, to experiment, refine, and gradually stretch creatures into larger and larger forms. One reason longevity encourages gigantism is that large bodies take an extraordinarily long time to build. On land, animals rarely get the chance. Predators, disease, competition, and environmental swings make long lives risky. But in the deep ocean, where everything is stable, quiet, and slow, a creature can take its time. Nobody expects a juvenile deep-sea giant to hurry. It can spend decades gathering the energy it needs to add a few centimeters, like a construction project run entirely by extremely patient interns. Growth becomes a lifetime hobby. Because individuals live for so long, generations also span much wider time frames. This allows genetic traits that favor slow, steady, persistent growth to flourish. Instead of evolving in short, frantic bursts like species in chaotic environments do, deep sea creatures evolve in long arcs, where gigantism can build slowly across many generations. Evolution here moves like a glacier, quiet, massive, and unstoppable once it gets going. Another powerful effect of longevity is that it creates biological durability. The longer a creature is expected to live, the stronger and more reliable its tissues must be. Cells repair themselves more efficiently. Damage accumulates at a snail's pace. Many deep-sea species have astonishingly low rates of biological wear and tear, allowing them to maintain large bodies without collapsing under decades of use. Some have enzymes that work like full-time custodians, cleaning up molecular messes before they become problems. Others possess specialized genetic tools that seem designed to stretch lifespan past any reasonable limit. It is as though time itself tries to age them, and their biology politely declines the offer. This unusual longevity also changes how deep-sea organisms interact with their environment. When you expect to be around for a few hundred years, you do not rush into anything, not reproduction, not migration, not growth spurts. Life takes on a contemplative rhythm. A deep-sea giant may spend its first several decades simply drifting, learning the currents, testing feeding strategies, and figuring out which part of the abyss feels most like home. All the while, its body quietly gathers mass, adding layers and strengthening structures with the slow confidence of something that knows it has all the time in the world. Humorously enough, the slow aging of deep-sea creatures makes the idea of anniversaries nearly meaningless. A century-old creature might be experiencing what, in its own internal calendar, feels like middle school. If deep-sea animals exchanged birthday cards, they'd probably have to make them waterproof, fireproof, and valid for about 100 years, because there's no telling when the recipient would finally get around to opening it. You can almost imagine two ancient fish meeting on the seafloor, one squinting and saying, "Didn't I see you at my hatching?" and the other replying, "Possibly. Was that before or after the last ice age?" The glacial pace of life also reduces stressors that normally limit size. Most deep-sea animals face remarkably few immediate threats. There are predators, yes, but far fewer than in surface ecosystems. There are no storms, no catastrophic seasonal shifts, no mass migrations that force rapid adaptation. When a creature does not have to live fast and die young, it can live slow and grow large. This absence of hurry is one of the most underrated ingredients in the recipe for gigantism. And then there is the sheer stability of the deep-sea environment. Temperatures barely change, currents shift slowly, chemical conditions remain steady for centuries. In such a predictable world, evolution can favor size without worrying that an abrupt environmental shift will suddenly turn enormous bodies into liabilities. Longevity and environmental stability reinforce one another, creating generations of creatures that remain in the same ecological niche long enough to grow far bigger than their shallower cousins ever could. All of this leads to a simple but profound truth. In the deep sea, time is a resource, a big, generous, almost absurdly abundant resource. And species that tap into that immense reservoir of years and centuries end up with sizes that defy expectations. Gigantism here is not a quick reaction or a sudden evolutionary gamble. It is a slow masterpiece, crafted across lifetimes so long that many surface creatures would cycle through entire civilizations before a deep-sea giant even reaches maturity. So while we humans measure our lives in birthdays, anniversaries, and milestones, the deep sea keeps its own calendar, one written in centuries, not seasons. And its creatures, aging at a pace so slow they might forget they are aging at all, grow into giants shaped by the one thing the abyss has more of than anything else: time itself. If the deep sea had a rule book, one of the first entries would be something painfully universal. Do not get eaten. Down in the dark, where meals are rare and opportunities to feed are rare, predators are not casual hobbyists. They are focused, relentless, and often equipped with mouth parts that look like they were designed by someone who lost a bet. This is an ecosystem where anything edible is fair game, and anything that hesitates becomes a snack before it realizes it should have been swimming in the opposite direction. So in a world full of hungry, stealthy, beautifully adapted predators, gigantism offers a kind of VIP security. Grow big enough that even predators politely swim around you. Predation pressure at the surface tends to be intense and frequent, but in the deep sea, it becomes something more unpredictable. You cannot see predators coming because vision barely works in the eternal dark. You cannot hear them coming because sound behaves differently under immense pressure. You cannot smell them coming because the currents move sluggishly, carrying scents at a pace that feels like a postal service from ancient times. So instead of relying on early warning systems, many deep-sea creatures rely on something far simpler and far more effective, being too big to bother with. The logic is elegantly primal. If hunting you requires more effort than the energy you are worth, most predators will lose interest. A small creature is a convenient snack. A medium creature is a meal worth a chase. But a giant is a project. A giant is the kind of undertaking predators consider only if they are both extremely motivated and extremely bored. It is the aquatic equivalent of seeing a massive 4-layer cake when you only wanted a cookie. Sure, it is technically food, but do you really want to commit? One of the clearest examples of this is the large amphipods known to the abyss. While their smaller cousins scatter at the slightest motion, the giants do not seem to hurry for anything. They stroll along the sea floor like they own the place. Their size alone discourages the average predator, who quickly calculates that there are far easier options available. Why wrestle with a giant crustacean the size of a human forearm when you could snack on something smaller, squishier, and less prone to pinching you into a moral lesson? But gigantism does more than just raise the difficulty level for would-be predators. It adds physical advantages. Larger animals can generate greater force with their limbs, jaws, or muscular contractions. Even if they move slowly, their mass means that a defensive swipe carries power. A predator might land a bite, but the giant's retaliation could be the kind of blunt force response that makes predators reconsider their life choices. Defensive structures scale beautifully with size. Thicker exoskeletons, tougher skin, more muscle fibers packed into every square centimeter. It is hard to chew something that feels like it was engineered from industrial-grade materials. Interestingly, being huge also makes camouflage more effective than one might assume. Many deep-sea giants move so slowly, so subtly, and so steadily that they blend into the background like living geological features. To the untrained eye, or even to the very trained eye of a deep-sea predator, they can appear to be part of the sea floor, or a drifting piece of debris. Movement in the abyss is rare, and when something enormous drifts without sudden motion, it might not even register as alive. This passive invisibility works wonders. It is hard to attack something you cannot confidently identify. Another underrated advantage of size is discouraging ambush. Smaller prey trigger a predator's instincts, quick movements, flickers of motion, darting shapes. These are signals that scream food. But the movement of a giant is so slow and sweeping that it falls outside the usual prey profile. Predators expect dinner to behave like a quick, frantic burst of motion, not a drifting entity the size of a beanbag chair that appears to be contemplating the mysteries of existence. The unexpectedness of giants throws predators off their game. By the time they figure out what they are looking at, it is already calmly floated out of range like an underwater planet minding its own business. Then comes the strategic advantage of shape and spacing. Some giants grow long appendages or wide bodies that create the illusion of a larger presence than they truly are. A predator might approach, sense an enormous silhouette, and decide it wants no part of whatever this is. Other giants grow in ways that reduce available attack angles. They might spread out across the sea floor, making it nearly impossible to be grabbed or bitten without the predator risking entanglement. Essentially, these giants use geometry as self-defense. Predators, being practical creatures, quickly learn which targets are worth pursuing and which ones come with a checklist of physical challenges. Why attempt an attack that might result in injury? Why risk spending precious energy wrestling a giant that could flip you upside down with one irritated gesture? In the deep sea, where calories are worth more than gold, wasting energy is one of the few unforgivable mistakes. And so giants earn respect not through speed or stealth, but through sheer, undeniable presence. This does not mean they are invincible. Nothing in the ocean ever is. But gigantism gives them a degree of freedom rarely afforded to smaller animals. They can forage without glancing nervously in every direction. They can drift without constantly checking over their shoulder. They navigate the dark realm with an ease granted not by dominance, but by inconvenience. They are too big to eat, too tough to fight, too slow to act like prey, and too massive to mistake for anything but a creature that has earned its space in the abyss. And so, in a world where being eaten is a constant concern, some creatures choose the simplest solution: grow large enough that even predators politely swim around you as if saying, "Pardon me, carry on, I didn't see anything." The deeper you sink into the ocean, the more the water around you begins to feel less like a playful liquid and more like a very patient, very heavy substance that isn't entirely convinced you should be moving through it at all. Down at abyssal depths, water stops behaving like the friendly, swishable stuff we splash through at the beach. It thickens, it presses, it drags, it clings to every surface, treating motion like a delicate negotiation rather than a simple physical act. In this world where every push is resisted and every flutter is dampened, hydrodynamics becomes less of a convenience and more of a survival requirement. And this is where the giants of the deep reveal one of their most astonishing advantages. They move through this dense environment with the silent certainty of underwater freight trains that glide instead of rumble. To appreciate this, imagine trying to swim through gelatin that refuses to make your life easy. Every stroke feels burdensome. Every kick is a sad suggestion rather than a forceful command. That is more or less the experience of moving in deep water, where pressure packs the molecules so tightly that drag becomes a constant companion. Smaller creatures often flutter against this resistance with frantic bursts, like birds trying to fight a hurricane in slow motion. Larger creatures, however, have a completely different relationship with the water. This difference begins with sheer mass. Big bodies carry momentum like a secret weapon. Once a giant gets moving, the dense water actually helps keep it going. It's a bit like pushing a heavy train. It requires effort to get started, but once in motion, its own mass fights to maintain the glide. The deep-sea giants take advantage of this principle, using long, sweeping movements that send them forward in beautiful, extended arcs. They do not dash, they do not dart. They commit to motion the way someone commits to a nap after a large meal, fully, peacefully, and with zero intention of stopping abruptly. Their shape plays a massive role in this underwater fluidity. Elongated bodies, streamlined exteriors, tapered ends. These are not aesthetic choices. They are evolutionary masterpieces sculpted by drag. Water pushes hard against blunt shapes, but slides more willingly around bodies that stretch and narrow. Many deep-sea giants resemble living ribbons, torpedoes, or serpentine curves, giving them a hydrodynamic profile that seems almost engineered. When these creatures move, the water parts around them with minimal resistance, as if acknowledging, "Fine, you may pass." Even their skin contributes to the efficiency. Some giants possess surfaces so smooth they make polished marble jealous. Others have microstructures that break up turbulence, reducing the chaotic swirls of water that waste energy. Every detail of their exterior, whether scale, gelatinous layer, or flexible membrane, serves to make movement smoother. In the crushing dark, these creatures treat drag reduction as a lifestyle. Then there's the role of elasticity. Many deep-sea giants have bodies that flex in slow, sinuous waves. This flexibility distributes motion evenly along the body, turning each muscle contraction into a long, efficient undulation rather than a quick twitch. When a giant moves, it isn't simply pushing water aside, it's negotiating with it, persuading it to help rather than hinder. This cooperative motion is remarkably efficient in high-pressure environments, allowing giants to travel considerable distances without burning through their energy reserves. Their fins often follow the same philosophy. Instead of rigid paddles or frantic flappers, deep-sea giants frequently sport fins that look like flowing banners or elongated sails. These structures catch thick currents gracefully, turning the subtle movements of water into useful propulsion. In essence, they let the ocean do some of the work. When currents shift, the fins bend and curve like underwater kites, converting even gentle flows into forward motion. This passive locomotion gives the giants a serene, effortless appearance. No splashing, no turbulence, just a quiet, steady glide. It's worth emphasizing how crucial silence is in the deep. Sound travels far and fast in water, and any creature that thrashes its way through the abyss might as well be ringing a dinner bell for predators or competitors miles away. Giants avoid this problem entirely. Their hydrodynamic efficiency makes them nearly silent. They slip through the dark like whispers, leaving no obvious wake behind them. Their motion doesn't attract attention because it barely announces itself at all, and size only enhances this. Small creatures get buffeted around by microcurrents, swirls, and tiny eddies. They struggle to hold a straight path, constantly overcorrecting like nervous bicyclists on a windy day. Giants, by contrast, dominate the currents around them. Their mass allows them to ignore the small disturbances that plague tiny animals. They move as though the water has agreed to cooperate, smoothing itself around their form as if they were royalty. These qualities have profound biological implications. Efficient movement means less energy spent searching for food, exploring territory, avoiding trouble, or migrating across the deep landscape. A giant's body becomes not only a shelter and a feeding tool, but also a vehicle built for the most demanding road in the world, one made entirely of dense, unyielding liquid. The freight train analogy is accurate not just for the way they move, but for how reliably they travel. They cover miles without hurry, burning energy so slowly that the journey becomes a natural extension of their existence. The giants of the deep are not just large, they are hydrodynamic masterpieces. Every curve, every sweep, every slow-motion ripple works together to conquer an environment that resists motion at every turn. These creatures glide because evolution has spent millennia sculpting them into the perfect shapes for a world where water feels more like a physical obstacle course than a habitat. And so they continue drifting through the abyss, massive, graceful, and unbothered, underwater freight trains that glide instead of rumble, reminding us that in the deep sea, elegance is not a luxury. It's a survival strategy. In the deep sea, growing up is not a phase. It is a lifestyle, a marathon, and in many cases, a centuries-long commitment to taking one's sweet time. While surface creatures rush through life, sprouting, maturing, reproducing, and checking all their evolutionary boxes before the next predator or winter storm arrives. The deep sea operates on an entirely different schedule. Down here, growing is not a race. It is a leisurely stroll that stretches across decades, sometimes centuries. With creatures so unhurried, they make procrastination look like a professional sport. If there were awards for postponing adulthood, deep-sea giants would be the undefeated champions. Slow growth is not just common in the deep sea, it is practically mandatory. Every aspect of this environment encourages delayed development. Food arrives irregularly, temperatures linger near freezing. Metabolism idles along at the pace of a thoughtful sigh. With so little energy coming in, the body cannot afford rapid construction. Instead, tissues accumulate gradually, layer by layer, cell by patient cell, like a cathedral built by a single monk who occasionally takes century-long breaks. This slow construction leads to bodies that are surprisingly robust. When growth unfolds over long periods, tissues form with meticulous efficiency. Nothing is rushed, nothing is sloppily assembled, and nothing is wasted. The result is biological architecture that often lasts hundreds of years. Surface animals push for fast growth because their environments demand speed. Storms shift, predators attack, climates change. But the deep sea is a realm where time barely budges. Nothing hurries, so nothing needs to hurry. Growth becomes a slow, thoughtful investment rather than a desperate scramble. Slow growth also helps deep-sea creatures avoid the pitfalls of metabolic chaos. Building a large body quickly requires massive amounts of energy, which simply do not exist in the nutrient-scarce abyss. A creature that tried to grow fast down here would burn through its reserves long before completing the blueprint. By stretching growth across centuries, giants avoid metabolic bankruptcy. They maintain energy balance, accumulate resources slowly, and build structures only when they have the means to support them. It is the biological equivalent of saving up for a house rather than buying it impulsively and figuring out the mortgage later. Another striking advantage of slow growth is increased survival during early life stages. In surface ecosystems, the early years of an animal's life are a frantic game of dodge the disaster. Juveniles grow fast because they must outpace predators, competition, and environmental chaos. But in the deep sea, where life operates at a whisper, predators are fewer, competition is minimal, and conditions are astonishingly stable. Young deep-sea creatures do not need to rush toward adulthood. They can drift, feed, and grow at the pace of a melting glacier. Their long developmental windows allow them to build resilience and experience before stepping into the full responsibilities of gianthood. This drawn-out growth also plays a role in shaping the extraordinary forms of deep-sea giants. When development evolves over a century or more, it opens the door for large-scale biological experimentation. Small changes accumulate over enormous stretches of time, allowing organisms to grow into shapes and sizes that would be impossible under the pressures of faster environments. Slow growth acts like a sculptor with infinite time to chisel, allowing evolution to push boundaries gradually without collapsing the organism under sudden demands. One of the fascinating consequences of this relaxed pace is the absence of traditional life stages in some species. Many deep-sea giants do not experience clear juvenile, adolescent, and adult phases. Instead, their lives unfold as a gentle gradient, with size increasing so slowly that it would take a time lapse spanning several human civilizations to notice the difference. If one could interview these creatures at various ages, the conversations would probably go something like, "How old are you now?" "Still not sure." "Ask me again in 50 years." Slow growth also contributes to long-term ecological roles. A creature that spends centuries expanding into its final size becomes a stable fixture of the deep sea environment. Some giants outlive environmental changes, outlive entire communities of neighbors, and sometimes outlive the few scientists who even know they exist. Their presence stabilizes food webs, influences nutrient cycling, and provides reliability in an ecosystem that, for all its stillness, depends deeply on continuity. But perhaps the most charming aspect of slow growth is the way it reflects the deep sea's overall philosophy. Everything down there follows the same relaxed rhythm: the drifting of currents, the settling of organic particles, the quiet decay of fallen creatures, the silent watching of predators. Life does not sprint. It glides. Growth does not leap. It drifts upward. And those enormous bodies, those magnificent giants that seem too large to be real, are shaped not by sudden events, but by the gentle, persistent accumulation of life over spans of time that challenge human imagination. It is easy to think of gigantism as something dramatic, something that bursts forth in spectacular evolutionary moments. But in the deep sea, gigantism is the slowest revolution in nature. It is the result of tiny gains made over centuries, of patient growth that steadily expands until the creature is no longer merely large. It becomes monumental. And so the giants of the abyss continue their slow rise, building themselves with the unhurried persistence of beings who understand that time is not their enemy. It is their collaborator, their sculptor, their quiet, constant companion. In the deep sea, where patience is more powerful than speed, becoming enormous is not a race. It is a long, slow masterpiece created by Earth's ultimate procrastination champions. If there's one thing the deep sea teaches its residents, it's the value of preparation. Not casual preparation, apocalyptic preparation. The kind of readiness that would make human doomsday planners nod approvingly while quietly taking notes. Down in the abyss, where meals are as rare as polite internet comment sections, creatures must treat every calorie like treasure. Food is unpredictable, feasts come without warning, and scarcity is the default setting. So giant bodies evolve not just to move, feed, or defend, but to stockpile, to store nutrients with the dedication of creatures who treat their own tissues like biological storage lockers. Resource storage might not sound glamorous, but in the deep sea, it is one of the most crucial survival skills. Imagine a world where you never know when your next meal will drift by. It could be tomorrow. It could be 6 months from now. It could be a whale carcass dropping from the heavens like an unexpected miracle, followed by weeks of absolute nothing. In that kind of environment, being small and having limited reserves is a gamble no creature wants to make. Larger bodies, however, offer space, precious, life-saving space for storing the energy hoarded from rare feeding events. Many deep-sea giants build up thick layers of energy-rich tissues. Some store fats, others accumulate glycogen, still others stockpile oils that can be slowly metabolized over long periods. These tissues act like onboard pantries, allowing the animals to survive long fasting stretches without dipping into emergency mode. Think of them as oceanic survivalists who always keep 3 months of canned beans on hand. But in this case, the beans just happen to be part of their own bodies. The beauty of giant-sized storage is its efficiency. The relationship between body size and storage capacity is not linear. It's exponential. As the body increases in volume, the storage capacity increases faster than its energy expenditure. Bigger bodies lose proportionally less energy to the environment, and proportionally more of their mass can be dedicated to reserves. In other words, the larger you get, the better your return on investment. A tiny creature might survive days without food. A giant can survive months. Some, astonishingly, can survive years. It's the abyssal version of having a trust fund. But resource storage in giant creatures isn't just about fat. Some species rely on gelatinous tissues, squishy, buoyant masses that serve multiple purposes. These tissues hold water, lipids, and sometimes unique compounds that break down slowly, dribbling out energy like a miser carefully feeding coins into a parking meter. Gelatinous bodies might look like lazy design choices, but they are brilliant from an energy standpoint. They cost little to maintain, store nutrients reliably, and resist compression in deep pressure. They are the Swiss Army knives of survival materials. The importance of storage becomes even clearer when we consider the nature of deep-sea meals. When a dead creature sinks from the surface, it becomes a coveted feast known as a fall. Whale falls are the most famous, offering hundreds of thousands of calories in a single event. For a deep-sea giant, encountering such a meal is like hitting the jackpot. They can gorge themselves, indulging in the kind of feast that would make surface animals look like they're nibbling snacks. Every bite becomes a deposit into the nutrient bank account they rely on for the long, uncertain future. And creatures that specialize in scavenging are often giant for this very reason. They need the capacity to devour massive quantities at once. They don't have the luxury of returning to a steady food source. They don't forage daily. They feast intensely, then live off the stored nutrients while drifting through the nutrient-poor dark. These giants are the ocean's preppers, metabolically disciplined, opportunistic, and always ready for the next unpredictable food event. But storage isn't just about safety during famine. It also provides the fuel needed for reproduction, growth, and repair in the deep. For creatures that may only encounter mates seasonally or sporadically, having the reserves to invest in reproduction whenever the opportunity arises is essential. Eggs, sperm, and brooding all require energy that must come from internal stores because the environment isn't handing out extra calories for special occasions. Being giant means being ready no matter when the moment arrives. Another captivating aspect of giant storage systems is how they influence behavior. A creature with extensive energy reserves can afford to move, explore, or migrate when needed. Smaller organisms burn calories too quickly to risk long-distance travel. Giants, on the other hand, carry their fuel with them like living caravans. They can seek out new feeding grounds, new thermal zones, or new terrain without fearing starvation during the trip. Their bodies are both transport and supply depot. Some deep-sea giants even show seasonal rhythms in their storage layers, swelling with nutrients during productive periods and slowly using them up during lean seasons. Even though the deep sea is famously stable, surface-driven productivity cycles still influence what drifts downward. When the upper ocean experiences blooms, more material falls, and giants take advantage of the feast. When the blooms fade, they tap into their stored savings, floating calmly as if they had predicted the downturn all along. This balance between feast and famine defines life in the deep. It shapes bodies, behaviors, metabolisms, even lifespans. And gigantism fits perfectly into this rhythm. A larger form is not merely an evolutionary decoration. It is a strategic container, a vault, a pantry lined with proteins, oils, and fats, all waiting to be called upon when the ocean refuses to offer anything else. It might feel odd to think of majestic deep-sea giants as hoarders, but that is precisely what they are. quiet, drifting survivalists storing sustenance for an unpredictable world. Their vast bodies are built not just to be impressive, but to endure, to keep moving, breathing, and growing no matter how stingy the environment becomes. In the abyss, survival is not guaranteed. Luck helps, patience helps, but nothing helps quite like having your own built-in food storage system, making these giants the deep ocean's ultimate doomsday planners, prepared, stocked, and always ready for whatever the dark throws their way. The deeper you venture into the ocean, the quieter the world becomes, not just in sound, but in presence. Life thins out until the seafloor feels less like an ecosystem and more like an abandoned kingdom waiting for inhabitants. The bustling energy of coral reefs, the swirling chaos of coastal waters, even the scattered communities of the midwater all fade into a vast, solemn emptiness. And in this sparsely populated realm, deep-sea giants find themselves ruling with all the effort of monarchs who inherited a kingdom where nobody else showed up. Reduced competition is not just a perk, it's the silent architect of their enormous size. Competition on the surface is fierce. Every niche is crowded with animals ready to fight for territory, food, mates, sunlight, or even a good hiding spot. Shallow ecosystems run on strategies honed through constant conflict, speed, camouflage, agility, aggression, cleverness, adaptability. But as you sink through the layers of the ocean, one truth becomes inescapable. Not many species can handle the pressure, cold, darkness, and food scarcity that define the abyss. The deeper you go, the more the roster of life shrinks, until only a resilient handful remains. With fewer species comes fewer competitors. The absence of rivals transforms the rules of survival. Instead of constantly adapting to outcompete dozens of hungry neighbors, deep-sea creatures evolve in a world where resources, though limited, are not fought over with frantic desperation. If a large meal drifts down, a giant scavenger rarely finds itself in a chaotic feeding frenzy. It may attract a few other creatures, perhaps some crabs, worms, or slow-moving fish, but the enormous swarms typical of surface ecosystems never materialize. It's like showing up to a supposedly crowded sail and finding out you're the only one who knew it existed. This relative peace reshapes evolutionary pressures. In shallow waters, energy is spent competing, chasing, fleeing, defending, outmaneuvering. But in the deep sea, energy goes into endurance, storage, and gradual growth. There is no need to rush toward resources if there's no one else racing you. The absence of competition allows giants to grow slowly and steadily without worrying about being overshadowed by faster-growing competitors. Their size becomes a product of prolonged opportunity, space to expand, time to develop, and a kingdom largely free of rivals. But the story goes deeper than just fewer animals. The types of competition that do exist in the abyss are drastically different from those near the surface. Shallow ecosystems often involve complex interactions among predators, prey, grazers, filter feeders, scavengers, and everything in between. Roles overlap constantly, Species evolve in tight feedback loops, pushing each other into specialized niches like puzzle pieces forced to fit. In contrast, the deep sea has far fewer puzzle pieces. Niches are broader, looser, and often unclaimed. A single giant species can dominate a role without bumping into competitors because the ecological space is simply that vast and unoccupied. Take predation. While there are predators in the deep, their numbers are limited. Being eaten is still a concern, but not an everyday expectation. This absence of constant predatory pressure means creatures do not have to devote their entire lifelines to staying hidden or fleeing. Instead of developing sleek defensive strategies or elaborate escape behaviors, they invest their resources into growing larger bodies, richer reserves, and more efficient metabolisms. Giant size becomes evolution's way of capitalizing on the freedom provided by emptiness. Territory follows a similar pattern. Many deep-sea giants roam wide distances because there's nothing stopping them. No territorial disputes, no turf battles, no rival species marking borders or patrolling boundaries. When a giant decides to drift across the seafloor, it's not trespassing, it's exploring. And with so few species sharing the landscape, each individual essentially becomes its own traveling ecosystem, interacting with the environment on a scale that smaller, surface-bound creatures could never dream of. This lack of competition also allows unusual and extravagant forms to evolve without interference. In crowded ecosystems, strange or inefficient body plans often get weeded out quickly. Here, however, the environment has the luxury of letting oddities persist long enough to become successful strategies. Ever wonder how deep-sea creatures end up with bizarre features, elongated limbs, glowing organs, ribbon-like bodies, disproportionate mouths, or shapes that defy casual description? One reason is simple. Nobody else is around to challenge them. They can afford to take evolutionary risks because the competitive landscape is so empty. Being metaphorical monarchs does not mean these giants are privileged in any luxurious sense. Their kingdom is still dark, cold, and unforgiving. The throne comes with responsibilities, conserving energy, enduring famine, navigating currents, surviving intense pressure. But when it comes to competition, they enjoy a freedom that most ecosystems would never permit. It's an isolated sovereignty, the quiet reign of creatures that grow larger and stranger simply because nothing else stands in their way. Even reproduction is shaped by this lack of rivalry. With fewer species competing for mates or territories, giants can reproduce on timelines as slow as their growth rates. They release their offspring without fear that a swarm of competitors will immediately outcompete them. While survival is never guaranteed, especially for juveniles floating in a vast, indifferent ocean, the sheer emptiness provides a buffer. Young deep-sea creatures can drift without constantly bumping into enemies or rivals, giving them a fighting chance to eventually join the ranks of the abyssal giants. In a way, gigantism is not just a physical trait, it's a social position. The giants of the deep aren't competing for the crown. They simply inherit it by virtue of being among the few species able to survive at all. Their kingdom is silent, sparse, and immense, stretching across miles of seafloor where each giant rules its patch of darkness without challenge. And so, in this vast empty kingdom, they flourish, massive, majestic, and almost regal in their solitude. Evolution gave them size, not through battle, but through freedom, not through rivalry, but through absence. They are the monarchs of a world where the throne sits open, waiting for any creature bold enough and large enough to claim it. Reproduction in the deep sea is less of a romantic rendezvous and more of a cosmic scavenger hunt. Imagine living in a world so dark and so empty that finding another member of your own species feels like winning a lottery you didn't know you entered. Down here, the ocean stretches into unimaginable distances, an endless void where the closest potential partner might be drifting hundreds of meters or even kilometers away. This challenge shapes every aspect of life, and evolution responds with one unmistakable trend. If you want to reproduce successfully in the abyss, being big helps. Being very big helps even more. Giants have no trouble being noticed in a place where everyone else is basically a glowing raisin. Size is a signal. In the eternal night of the deep sea, visual information is limited and physical encounters are rare. But chemical signals, scents, hormones, pheromones, travel with surprising persistence. And the larger the creature, the more powerful those signals become. A giant, deep-sea organism is essentially a beacon of biological advertisement, sending chemical announcements across the water like underwater postcards. Hello, I'm here, I'm large, and I'd appreciate company. Smaller creatures produce weaker signals, easily drowned out by currents or diluted into nothing. Giants, however, broadcast their presence with the quiet confidence of animals that know their messages will eventually reach someone. This advantage extends beyond simple detection. Large bodies often house larger reproductive organs capable of producing more eggs, more sperm, or more larvae than smaller species could ever dream of. In the deep sea, where encounters are rare and reproduction cannot rely on frequent pairings, producing enormous quantities of gametes becomes essential. A big creature can release a blizzard of reproductive material into the water, increasing the odds that at least some will meet the matching half from another member of the species. It's a numbers game played on an oceanic scale, and giants stack the deck by sheer volume. Some species take an even more extravagant route. They develop elaborate reproductive displays. These aren't visual spectacles. Light is too scarce, but chemical or vibrational cues. Large bodies can produce stronger pulses and waves that travel farther through dense water. A giant shifting or flexing its body sends out subtle ripples that smaller creatures simply cannot generate. To a distant member of the same species, these vibrations act like a lighthouse, not visual but rhythmic, a coded announcement that something large, alive, and genetically compatible is drifting in the darkness. On top of that, large size helps with one of the strangest challenges of deep-sea courtship, locating the correct species. Many organisms down here glow, drift, bob, or pulse in similar ways. When everything looks like an abstract dot in the dark, misidentification is a real risk, and mating mistakes are not particularly productive. A large individual, however, stands out unmistakably. There's no confusing a multi-meter-long giant with a tiny drifting organism the size of a berry. The abyss may be vast, but giants make their presence unmistakable. If the deep sea had dating profiles, giants wouldn't even need photos. The sheer scale would do the talking. This visibility also influences courtship strategies. Some species evolve to stay large for longer periods, not simply for survival, but to increase the number of reproductive opportunities over their lifetime. A bigger body can sustain a longer reproductive window, sometimes spanning decades. Slow growth means they delay maturity, but once adulthood arrives, the creature becomes a long-term producer of offspring. In a world where encounters may only happen occasionally, longevity fused with size becomes an unbeatable mating strategy. But gigantism goes beyond simple communication. It shapes the physical act of reproduction itself. Some deep-sea animals practice external fertilization, releasing gametes into the water column. The larger the parent, the greater the quantity of genetic material released. This dramatically improves the chances of successful fertilization in an environment that does not guarantee proximity. A giant might produce millions of eggs in one event. Even if only a fraction find sperm, that fraction could sustain the species. Other species take the opposite approach. Instead of spreading reproductive material widely, they invest heavily in fewer, larger offspring, each packed with the nutrients needed to survive long periods of scarcity. A giant body allows them to allocate massive resources to each embryo. The result is babies born with enough built-in energy to make it through the early stages of life without feeding, a crucial advantage in a world where food is a luxury, not a guarantee. Size also plays a key role in species that rely on brooding or parental care. Some deep-sea giants shield their eggs in their own bodies, wrapping them in protective tissues, carrying them in specialized pouches, or holding them in tentacles like delicate ornaments. Only a large organism has the space to support such strategies. A giant can guard hundreds of eggs without limiting its movement or risking starvation, a feat that smaller animals could never manage. And then there's mate attraction. Some deep-sea giants use bioluminescence, not as a hunting tool or a warning, but as a romantic beacon. Larger bodies can host larger light-producing organs, creating brighter or more complex displays. In the gloom of the abyss, these glows cut through the dark like glowing graffiti announcing availability. Smaller creatures might flicker timidly, but giants radiate confidence, broadcasting courtship signals visible across impressive distances. Best of all, large creatures reduce the risk of reproductive competition within their own species. In the deep sea, where individuals rarely meet, the odds of competing with a rival of the same species are already low. But being enormous, being unmistakably noticeable, means that when another of your species does appear, they are far more likely to find you than someone else. It's a romantic monopoly granted by physics and biology acting in tandem. So in a world where dating feels like searching for a soulmate in a pitch-black stadium the size of a continent, gigantism becomes not just advantageous, but essential. Big bodies amplify signals, boost reproduction, safeguard offspring, and ensure that when life gives you a rare chance to pass on your genes, you seize it with every biological tool available. Down in the abyss, giants don't just stand out. They shine, vibrate, release, attract, and sustain the next generation with such impressive efficiency that it's no wonder they thrive. In a realm where everyone else is basically a glowing raisin, being enormous means being unmistakably, unforgettably alive. Isolation in the deep sea is not a metaphor, it is a geographic sentence. The abyss is carved into trenches, canyons, plateaus, and massive basins separated by distances so immense and so inhospitable that species living in one region may never cross paths with those in another. This isn't just physical isolation, it's evolutionary quarantine. Populations become stranded in pockets of darkness, separated by miles of cold water, geological obstacles, and sheer depth. And once evolution finds itself with a captive audience and no interruptions, strange things begin to happen. Traits wander, forms twist, sizes inflate. It's as if evolution, left alone with too much time and not enough supervision, started doodling in the dark just to see what would happen. This process is called evolutionary drift, a slow, aimless shifting of traits that occurs when populations are isolated long enough for randomness to shape biology. On land, drift happens too, but it's constantly interrupted by competitors, predators, climate events, and migrations. The deep sea doesn't have that level of chaos. It has silence. It has stability. It has time. And when drift unfolds over thousands or millions of years in an environment where nothing rushes and no one interferes, the results can be extraordinary. Creatures start changing in ways that feel less like survival strategy and more like a series of strange creative experiments. One of the most dramatic outcomes of drift in these isolated pockets is gigantism. Without external pressures to keep body size in check, no crowding, no temperature swings, no fierce interspecies battles, no frantic races to outcompete rivals, populations are free to drift into the realm of the oversized. Each generation becomes a subtle nudge away from the last, tiny genetic variations stacking like geological layers. Over eons, those small nudges can become monumental shifts. A shrimp-like ancestor that started off the size of a fingernail might, after countless generations in an isolated trench, end up the length of a human arm. And to the deep sea, this is not outrageous. It's Tuesday. But drift doesn't just inflate bodies, it warps them. In one trench, drift may favor creatures that elongate, slowly turning fish-like ancestors into ribbon-like beings that glide with eerie smoothness. In another zone, drift might push a population toward bulk and mass, creating rotund giants built like drifting boulders with fins. Elsewhere, drift might exaggerate appendages, producing organisms with arms or antennae so long and thin they look like threads of living lace floating in the dark. None of these changes are consciously directed. They're accidental, driven by random genetic mutations that stick around simply because nothing stops them. In a bustling ecosystem, natural selection would scrutinize these randomness-driven traits. Too weird? Gone. Too costly? Gone. Too inefficient? Deleted. But in isolated deep-sea pockets, even inefficient traits can persist if they don't harm survival. A creature might develop a strangely shaped body simply because that body shape didn't interfere with its slow drifting lifestyle. A population might start growing larger eyes, or smaller ones, or asymmetric jaws, or oddly shaped fins, not because these traits give huge advantages, but because drift nudged them in that direction, and no environmental force stepped in with a firm, absolutely not. Over time, these isolated groups accumulate their own quirks, their own oddities, their own biological signatures. If you looked at a map of deep-sea trenches, you'd essentially be looking at a collection of evolutionary islands, each home to life forms that grew apart from their ancestors like branches on a tree twisting toward the sun. Except in this case, the branches grew in total darkness and had no idea where they were going. Gigantism is especially prone to drift because large bodies can persist in isolation without triggering ecological restrictions. In many ecosystems, being big invites conflict. Big creatures need bigger territories, bigger meals, and face bigger risks from changing conditions. But deep trenches don't change. They're stable, quiet, reliable, like rooms in a museum that never renovate. A population living in one of these trenches may find itself freed from the usual checks and balances that keep size restrained. So drift can send size upward without consequence until the giants reach whatever dimensions the environment passively allows. This isolation-driven gigantism explains why two populations of what once was the same species can end up looking dramatically different after enough geological time passes. A small crustacean species living on one mid-ocean ridge might remain tiny forever. Meanwhile, its cousins trapped in a deeper, colder, more secluded basin could drift into enormous forms that would terrify any ancestor unlucky enough to stumble across them. It is the deep sea equivalent of siblings growing up to have completely different lifestyles. One becomes a librarian, the other becomes a circus performer, specializing in balancing refrigerators. And because these isolated pockets often lack predators or competitors that would challenge these changes, drift can lead to biological extremes, a trait that would be risky in any other environment, like extremely slow movement, enormous size, or fragile-looking appendages, may thrive simply because nothing in that specific pocket challenges it. Evolution gets to explore weird ideas without being critiqued by natural selection, the way an artist might fill pages with experimental sketches without worrying whether they make sense. Eventually, These populations drift so far genetically that they become entirely new species, creatures unrecognizable to their ancestors, shaped not by intense struggle, but by the gentle hand of time and randomness. And many of them become giants simply because nothing stopped them from doing so. In the deep sea's isolated ecosystems, gigantism is evolution's doodle, strange, oversized, whimsical, and sometimes baffling. But those doodles endure, drifting through the dark as reminders that in nature, weirdness isn't always a flaw. Sometimes it's simply what happens when evolution is left alone with too much time and no one watching over its shoulder. If you could take the emotional temperature of different ecosystems, coral reefs would be soap operas, flashing colors, loud personalities, constant drama. Coastal waters would be bustling cities, full of noise, change, and impulsive activity. The open ocean would be long, lonely highways. But the deep sea? The deep sea is the least dramatic neighborhood on Earth. Nothing rushes, nothing shouts, nothing throws a fit. Everything hums along with the calm, predictable regularity of a community meeting where everyone forgot to bring their opinions. And in this soothing quiet, in this monotone rhythm of water and darkness, deep sea giants find one of their greatest advantages, a perfectly stable environment that lets them grow slowly, steadily, and unimaginably large. Stability is not something the surface world does well. Up top, sunlight cycles daily, temperatures swing seasonally, storms rearrange coastlines, and entire food chains wobble based on whether plankton populations decide to bloom or bail. Animals living there must constantly adapt, adjust, flee, sprint, reproduce before winter, dodge hurricanes, or brace for droughts. Change is the one rule nobody escapes. But several kilometers down, all that noise gets filtered out. Light disappears, weather disappears, seasons disappear. The deep sea becomes a vast cathedral of consistency, where only the most patient forms of life survive. One of the quiet architects of this stability is the network of deep sea currents. Unlike surface currents, which crash, swirl, and shove everything in their path, deep currents are steady, cold, and predictable. They move like enormous conveyor belts, slowly dragging water masses around the globe in cycles that can take centuries to complete. You'll never see a deep current go rogue or start spinning in chaotic spirals. Their movements are deliberate, methodical, as though the ocean exhaled and forgot to inhale again for a few hundred years. These currents bring uniformity to the abyss. They regulate temperature with astounding precision. Some deep zones maintain the same degree of cold for thousands of consecutive years. They create chemical stability by circulating oxygen and nutrients evenly and slowly. They smooth out environmental fluctuations so thoroughly that a creature born in a particular trench could spend its entire lifespan experiencing conditions that barely change by a fraction of a degree. For a giant species that invests centuries into building its body, this lack of chaos is evolutionary gold. Steady conditions encourage slow but reliable growth. Remember, Deep-sea giants don't rush. They're not trying to reach adulthood before winter or before a predator wipes out half their population. Instead, they grow cell by cell, laying down tissues like bricks in a marathon construction project. Growth that might seem impossibly sluggish in the surface world becomes entirely reasonable when the environment never shifts the goalposts. Why hurry when the temperature won't change tomorrow? Why sprint when the currents will still be predictable 1,000 years from now? This constancy also reduces metabolic stress. Animals in volatile environments often experience bursts of high energy demand, escaping storms, chasing food during seasonal abundance, surviving heat waves. The giants of the deep avoid all that. Without dramatic changes in their surroundings, their metabolisms can purr along at a low, steady rate, allowing every calorie to be used with impeccable precision. No feast-famine cycle, no frantic sprinting, just long stretches of calm drifting, punctuated by the occasional meal or slow migration. Currents also help with dispersal. Giant species often produce larvae or juveniles that drift along these underwater highways, carried gently across great distances. While surface currents might fling small creatures around like tourists on a malfunctioning water ride, deep currents provide a slow and stable journey. This allows populations to spread into new areas without the turbulence that might kill or disorient them. The offspring travel far, but in a manner that suits the deep sea's unhurried lifestyle, drifting peacefully, not tossed unpredictably. There's another gift hidden in the deep sea's stability: predictability in resource flow. Organic matter that drifts downward from the surface does so in a steady trickle. It's not generous. No one would mistake it for abundance, but it's consistent. The rate of sinking particles, detritus, and biological debris remains surprisingly dependable across centuries. Deep-sea giants, with their long lifespans and slow metabolisms, are perfectly matched to this rhythm. They don't need sudden influxes of food. They survive on reliability, not abundance. Even the geology down here plays along. While earthquakes and volcanic activity do occur, most deep-sea environments remain stable for geological timescales. Mountains don't erode quickly. Basins don't shift radically. The sea floor does not undergo the kind of seasonal or annual transformations that reshape surface ecosystems. For a creature that might live hundreds of years, this is priceless. The home you're born into is the home you die in, unchanged and dependable, unless you happen to be living near a vent, in which case you still experience more stability than most surface environments. This extreme steadiness shapes evolution in subtle but powerful ways. Without environmental upheavals forcing rapid adaptation, traits like slow growth, huge body size, and energy-saving physiology become not just useful, but optimal. Nature can afford to invest in long-term strategies. Being enormous is not a gamble. It's a slow and steady response to a world that will not change beneath your fins or tentacles. And this stability also makes the giants feel, in a sense, eternal. They move through the deep with a confidence born of certainty. Nothing surprises them, nothing rushes them. Their world is quiet, predictable, and timeless. Being big isn't just possible here, it's practical. So yes, The deep sea may be pitch black, freezing cold, and crushingly pressurized, but it is also a realm of remarkable consistency, a place where change trickles instead of crashes, a place where life evolves not in bursts, but in patient, unhurried spirals. In short, the deep sea is the least dramatic neighborhood on Earth, steady as stone, calm as silence, and perfectly suited for giants who prefer growing at the speed of glaciers rather than the speed of crises. In most ecosystems, getting large requires engineering finesse. If you look at land animals, the biggest ones are basically walking architecture projects. Pillars for legs, reinforced joints, dense bones, carefully balanced masses. Everything must be built with the precision of a cathedral to keep gravity from turning them into tragic puddles. But in the deep sea, where gravity loses its negotiating power and buoyancy generously picks up the tab, giants follow a completely different strategy. They ditch the complicated engineering and embrace structural simplicity. Forget elaborate skeletons and weight-bearing bones. Many deep-sea giants skip the complicated architecture and just go full inflatable parade balloon. This soft-bodied approach might sound flimsy, but in the abyss, it's genius. At crushing depths, rigid structures become liabilities. Bones crack, chambers collapse. Anything designed to hold its shape risks folding under pressure like a poorly made lawn chair. The ocean's crushing force doesn't politely ask whether a structure can handle it. It applies pressure evenly from all sides, like a full-body hug that nobody asked for. Soft bodies, on the other hand, shrug off pressure effortlessly. There's nothing to collapse when there's nothing rigid to crush. A gelatinous body behaves like water in a water balloon, squeezable, flexible, and fully cooperative with the surrounding environment. This is why so many deep-sea giants look like drifting blimps, elongated ribbons, oversized jellies, or fleshy amorphous masses that seem to have been designed by a toddler armed with modeling clay. Their shapes aren't streamlined masterpieces. They're the biological equivalent of saying, "Close enough," because when the environment is this stable and buoyancy is this generous, you don't need perfection. You just need a body that floats, bends, and survives. Soft-bodied gigantism opens doors that rigid forms could never walk or drift through. Without the constraints of skeletal weight, these creatures can expand to enormous sizes without having to reinforce every additional centimeter. It's the difference between building a skyscraper and inflating a balloon of the same height. One requires months of planning and structural support columns. The other just needs enough air and the general hope that it won't bump into anything sharp. Consider the deep-sea jellyfish. These giants unfurl tentacles longer than a blue whale, drifting through the dark with a grace that defies their floppy form. Their bodies are barely more than gelatin and water, yet they can reach monumental sizes because everything about their design scales effortlessly. Double the length and nothing needs reinforcement. Triple it and the body simply stretches like taffy. Their anatomy is so fundamentally simple that size doesn't present a challenge. It's practically the default setting. Then there are the squid. While some species do have supportive structures, even the largest ones rely heavily on soft tissues. Their bodies are more like muscular tubes than rigid frameworks. allowing them to grow to lengths that would buckle or snap if they depended on solid skeletons. A giant squid is an elastic marvel, able to twist, compress, shift, and move in ways that no rigid-bodied creature could manage. It's less like an animal and more like a shape-shifting underwater duvet that occasionally decides to sprint. This structural simplicity also enables efficient energy usage. Bones and dense tissues are costly to build and maintain. They require calcium, phosphorus, active cellular construction, and constant repairs. Soft bodies, by comparison, are cheap. They're composed mostly of water, collagen, and flexible tissues, materials readily available even in the nutrient-poor deep. Building a massive gelatinous creature requires a fraction of the energy it would take to construct a smaller but fully armored animal. It's the biology equivalent of choosing a hammock over a steel-reinforced bunk bed. The absence of rigid structures also makes growth more gradual and less risky. A soft-bodied giant can expand slowly over decades without hitting critical limits where bones must be replaced, joints must be rebalanced, or weight suddenly becomes unmanageable. It's organic scalability, the kind software engineers dream about but rarely achieve. Add more tissue, and the organism simply becomes a larger version of itself. No redesign needed, no update required notifications from evolution. Interestingly, simplicity doesn't mean weakness. Many of these giants use their flexible bodies as built-in shock absorbers. When a predator bites a jelly-like creature, the body simply squishes, redistributes the force, and reforms its shape. With no rigid parts to break, soft giants can survive attacks that would cripple a more structured animal. Some are practically invincible lumps of resilience floating in the dark, stress-proof, pressure-proof, and unfazed by the occasional nibble. Simplicity also enhances maneuverability in the dense waters of the deep. Rigid bodies must fight drag. Soft bodies melt into it. They bend, ripple, and flow with currents instead of resisting them. A giant gelatinous creature doesn't push through the water. It partners with it, sculpting itself to reduce resistance. It's hydrodynamics through flexibility rather than force. There's also an element of evolutionary freedom here. With minimal structural constraints, deep-sea giants can take on bizarre shapes that would be impossible for rigid-bodied animals. Need longer tentacles? Just grow them. Want a saucer-shaped bell? Expand it. Fancy a body that looks like a translucent bedsheet drifting ominously through the darkness? Easy. Evolution in the deep sea often resembles improvisational art, fluid, expressive, unconstrained by bone or gravity. And this brings us to the real marvel. These giants aren't accidents of excess tissue. They are deliberate expressions of an environment that rewards simplicity over complexity. The deep sea doesn't care how many bones you have. It cares how well you handle pressure, how efficiently you use energy, and how gracefully you navigate an environment designed to squash anything rigid. So yes, many deep sea giants do skip the complicated architecture and go full inflatable parade balloon. But in the deep, that's not laziness, it's strategy, it's elegance through minimalism. its survival perfected by softness. In a realm of crushing forces and eternal dark, the simplest bodies grow to the grandest scales, floating monuments to the power of uncomplicated design. If the deep sea had a nightlife district, bioluminescence would be the neon signage that cuts through the dark, flickering with invitations, warnings, announcements, and the occasional mysterious glow that leaves scientists squinting at their screens. In this pitch-black world, light is currency, its language, its lure, its art. And when it comes to wielding that light, the giants of the deep don't settle for subtle glimmers. They turn themselves into full-scale billboards floating through the abyss, advertising whatever evolutionary message they need to convey. While small creatures flash tiny twinkles, more like distant stars trying to be noticed, giants glow with the confidence of an entity that knows you can't possibly miss it. When a creature spans several meters, even a modest glow becomes a sweeping beacon. A giant with bioluminescent organs doesn't just send signals, it broadcasts them. These are not dainty sparks. These are glowing declarations rippling across large surfaces, visible from distances that tiny animals could never dream of reaching. This oversized display ability transforms bioluminescence from a simple trick into a sophisticated tool. For many deep-sea giants, communication becomes clearer when the canvas is larger. If your body spans multiple meters, a patch of glowing cells the size of a handprint becomes a recognizable signal rather than a flicker lost to the currents. Patterns matter. Placement matters. Movement matters. A giant's light show can convey complex messages simply because its body offers enough real estate to craft them. Some giants use bioluminescence to coordinate with others of their kind. In a world where voices don't travel well and scent disperses slowly, light becomes a reliable form of communication. A giant might pulse its glow in rhythmic waves to indicate territory, readiness to mate, or even mild annoyance. Imagine a glowing "Do Not Disturb" sign drifting silently through the dark. Their signals function like cosmic Morse code, subtle enough to go unnoticed by outsiders, but clear enough for their own species to interpret. But communication is only the beginning. One of the most spectacular uses of bioluminescence in large creatures is hunting. Small predators use single points of light to lure prey close, like a flashlight in a dark room. But giants can craft entire lighting schemes. Some create luminous curtains that drift around them, confusing prey into wandering closer. Others generate pulses of light that mimic the movements of smaller creatures, essentially catfishing their victims with a performance so convincing it would deserve an award if the abyss had a film festival. The famous giant predators, like certain deep-dwelling squid, possess intricate arrays of light organs along their bodies. When they flash these in sequence, the effect can hypnotize or disorient prey. For small fish and drifting organisms not accustomed to large radiant displays, encountering a giant that lights up the surrounding water is something of a sensory overload. Some freeze, some flee, straight toward the predator, which is exactly what the giant is hoping for. Bioluminescence becomes not just a lure, but a calculated manipulation of perception. Large size also allows for bioluminescent decoys. Many giants can light up specific parts of their bodies independently. They might flash a distant appendage to draw attention away from their main body, or release glowing particles that drift like false targets. These distractions work beautifully in the abyss, where light is so rare that anything glowing instantly looks important. While prey fixate on the false signal, the giant moves silently in the dark, positioning itself for the strike. Yet giants don't just use bioluminescence for offense, they use it for defense too. Some species can ignite enormous bursts of light, creating brilliant flashes that blind or confuse predators. Imagine being a predator lurking in darkness and suddenly getting hit with a deep sea equivalent of a camera flash the size of a living billboard. In that moment of confusion, the giant can glide away, fading back into invisibility as though the whole event were a hallucination caused by a long night underwater. Another remarkable advantage of large-scale bioluminescence is its role in collective behavior. Some giants form loose aggregations, groups that drift together for feeding or reproduction. When each member glows, the entire group becomes a constellation drifting through the ocean. These luminous gatherings may help individuals stay oriented relative to one another or deter predators simply through sheer visual intimidation. A lone small creature may look vulnerable, but a gathering of glowing giants looks like the ocean accidentally turned on a floodlight. Of course, light production comes at a cost, and this is where gigantism pays off. Creating bioluminescence requires energy, chemical reactions involving luciferin and luciferase enzymes, or in some species, symbiotic bacteria that produce light. Small creatures must ration their glow carefully to avoid draining their limited reserves. Giants, with their large storage capacities and slow metabolic rates, can afford more elaborate displays. Their size gives them the fuel to shine longer, brighter, and more frequently than smaller species ever could. The versatility of bioluminescence in giants also allows them to control their visibility, contrary to what their size suggests. Many deep-sea giants are not constantly glowing like misplaced carnival floats. They turn their lights on and off strategically, using them only when needed, communicating, hunting, or maneuvering. Their enormous bodies become instruments, and bioluminescence is the spotlight they use with careful precision. This controlled glow also helps them navigate. In a world where even nearby objects can vanish into the dark, illuminating a portion of one's surroundings can offer momentary orientation. Giants may send out glow pulses to detect shapes, almost like underwater echolocation, but with light instead of sound. The glow reflects off particles or nearby surfaces, giving the creature information about obstacles or prey. And so, in the deep sea, where darkness rules with ancient authority, giants carve their presence through light. They advertise. They hypnotize. They communicate. They defend. They hunt. Their bioluminescence is more than a trick. It's a language, a strategy, a survival platform amplified by size. These giants aren't just living creatures. They're luminous billboards drifting across the abyss, lighting up the dark with messages written in pulses, patterns, and glowing threads, quiet, brilliant reminders that even in the deepest shadows, life finds a way to shine. When you think of gigantism on Earth, your mind might drift to famous cases on land or in fresh water, oversized creatures tucked away on islands, lakes, and isolated patches of wilderness. There's island gigantism, where animals grow big because predators are scarce and resources are steady. There's gigantism in ancient ecosystems, where dinosaurs ballooned to mountain-like proportions because the climate was warm and vegetation was abundant. Even today, certain lakes produce improbably large fish, and caves harbor salamanders that grow longer than their surface cousins because nothing disturbs them. But as far as evolutionary experiments go, the deep sea took the giant trend more seriously than any island ever could. If islands dabble in gigantism, the deep ocean committed to the bit. To understand what makes deep sea gigantism so unique, it helps to start with islands, the classic example. On islands, animals often grow larger because they face fewer predators and enjoy a stable environment. Think of giant tortoises, enormous birds, or oversized rodents lazily ruling their tropical kingdoms like laid-back aristocrats. But island gigantism is constrained by landmass. Trees run out, nesting spaces fill, food, even when plentiful, has limits. A giant on land must obey gravity, maintain structural integrity, and deal with competition. So even the most ambitious island ecosystem produces giants that are, well, manageable, lovable, respectable, but not exactly the stuff of oceanic myth. Now zoom into lakes and rivers. Some freshwater creatures grow larger because their habitats are nutrient-rich and stable, or because they occupy predator-free zones. Sturgeons, catfish, and freshwater eels have produced individuals that make fishermen question whether they've hooked a fish or a prehistoric ghost. But freshwater gigantism rarely approaches the absurdity of deep-sea giants. Lakes may be calm, but they aren't eternal. Water levels change, temperatures swing. Ecosystems flip after storms, droughts, or seasonal shifts. Freshwater giants exist within borders, a big lake, a deep river. Eventually, they hit the ceiling, both literally and ecologically. Even ancient gigantism, as dramatic as it was, followed rules. Dinosaurs achieved their massive sizes thanks to warm climates, abundant plants, efficient lungs, and long evolutionary timelines. But land is unforgiving. Gravity demands engineering. Bones must harden, limbs must scale, hearts must pump harder. Being enormous on land comes with an invoice full of biological expenses. Giant dinosaurs pushed the limits, but they still had limits. A sauropod couldn't inflate indefinitely. At some point, its legs would betray it, or its heart would stage a polite protest. But the deep sea? The deep sea laughs gently at these constraints. It takes one look at land's limited giants and decides to escalate. Down here, buoyancy cancels gravity's tantrums. Pressure encourages soft, scalable bodies. Food scarcity encourages storage. Stability encourages slow growth. Isolation encourages weirdness. And darkness encourages specialization. Every condition that restricts gigantism elsewhere becomes an ally in the abyss. The result is a realm where gigantism doesn't just occur, it flourishes so casually that it feels like the default setting. Deep-sea gigantism stands apart for several reasons, starting with the fact that it doesn't require solid structures. Land giants need reinforced skeletons. Deep-sea giants can be all jelly, all fluid, all stretch. No engineering, no bones, no problem. Giants in the abyss float, drift, and undulate with the ease of creatures liberated from gravity's paperwork. A creature can reach absurd lengths without its supporting tissues collapsing because the water cradles every square inch. Another difference is time. Many ecosystems don't stay stable long enough for gigantism to fully unfold. Forests burn, climates shift, rivers flood, islands rise and sink. But the deep sea, it has maintained stable conditions for millions of years. Evolution has had eons of uninterrupted quiet time to nurture giants. No mass extinctions ripping ecosystems apart. No dramatic temperature swings resetting biological trajectories. Where land works with bursts and interruptions, the deep sea moves like a slow, unbroken poem. Then comes pressure, something unique to the abyss. Pressure does not limit size, it removes constraints. High pressure reduces the risk of damaging impacts. It suppresses gas pockets. It makes water dense enough to support truly massive forms. A giant in the deep doesn't fear falling or stumbling. It exists in a world where size is less a burden and more an option entirely open for exploration. The way giants use space also sets the deep sea apart. On land or islands, giants eventually bump into borders. A giant tortoise cannot expand beyond the island's vegetation. A giant elk cannot outrun the limits of its forest. But deep-sea giants inhabit vast tracts of uninterrupted territory. The ocean floor is miles wide and thousands of miles long. Currents connect distant basins. Nothing fences in a giant in the abyss. Their world is as open as evolution could hope for, an infinite blueprint for bodies that might as well be organic submarines. Food dynamics also diverge sharply. On land, gigantism usually relies on abundant food. In the deep sea, paradoxically, gigantism thrives on scarcity. Storage, efficiency, patience, and slow metabolism allow giants to survive where smaller creatures might starve. No other ecosystem uses food scarcity as a sculpting tool for size on this scale. And then there's the creativity. Deep-sea giants aren't simply big versions of smaller relatives. They often look like entirely different life forms. elongated worms longer than buses, isopods the size of puppies, squids with tentacles that could double as transoceanic ropes. Island gigantism tweaks proportions. Deep-sea gigantism reimagines anatomy altogether. Compared to every other environment, the deep sea doesn't just produce giants, it perfects them. It refines them. It gives them the stage, the time, the geography, and the physics to evolve into the most extraordinary shapes and sizes nature can imagine. So while islands may proudly boast their large tortoises, enormous birds, and chunky rodents, the deep sea simply nods and says, politely but firmly, "Cute, but watch this." Because down here, gigantism isn't just a trait, it's a culture, a quiet, sprawling tradition of growing beyond expectations, in a world that offers nothing but time, darkness, and infinite room to expand. If someone asked you where on earth the biggest creatures hide, you might point to jungles, deserts, or mountain ranges. But the truth is far stranger. The greatest gatherings of giants live in a world beyond light, beyond warmth, beyond anything we associate with life at all. The deep sea, silent, cold, endless, has become the largest stage for oversized beings our planet has ever produced. It's almost poetic that a place so empty and hostile is also the birthplace of some of nature's most extravagant bodies. It's as though the ocean took every limitation, pressure, starvation, isolation, darkness, and used them as ingredients in a recipe whose final dish was simply, make it enormous. Across the chapters before this one, each force shaping deep-sea gigantism emerged like a character in a myth. Pressure appeared first, squeezing everything equally until soft, flexible bodies became the ideal foundation for growth. Cold followed, slowing life's internal clocks to a whisper and giving creatures the metabolic thriftiness to carry massive forms without constantly running on empty. Scarcity drifted in next, teaching giants to become patient eaters, resource hoarders, and low-energy gliders capable of surviving on whatever random scrap the ocean offered. Oxygen arrived as another sculptor, settling into the deep in thick, generous concentrations that fueled long, slow-burning metabolic fires. Longevity joined the cast, centuries of life offering century-long opportunities for growth. As if evolution said, take your time, become monumental. Predation pressure stepped into the narrative too, not as the fierce, dramatic force we see on land, but as a quiet reminder that being big often means being left alone. Why chase something the size of a sofa when bite-sized snacks are everywhere? Hydrodynamics added elegance, turning huge bodies into fluid, cruising shapes perfectly attuned to the thick, heavy water around them. Slow growth connected with that same water, taking advantage of the abyss's near-eternal stability to build giants steadily, cell by cell, without the chaotic disruptions that plague shallower ecosystems. Resource storage ensured that even when food vanished for months, reserves packed into giant forms kept them going like biological bunkers stocked for a very long winter. Reduced competition gave these giants room to stretch, big bodies filling niches that would be overcrowded and contested anywhere else. Reproductive strategies leaned into size, turning giant bodies into glowing advertisements and genetic fortresses capable of broadcasting signals and producing enormous numbers of offspring. Evolutionary drift added the strangest touches of all, allowing isolated populations to morph into colossal oddities simply because nothing stopped them. And through it all, environmental stability provided the backdrop. An ocean floor so unchanged, so predictable, so timeless, that evolution had all the patience in the world to craft these titanic creatures in slow motion. Then, bioluminescence lit up the darkness like the final flourish in a theater production, giants wielding light across their sprawling bodies to communicate, hunt, avoid danger, or just remind the abyss that they were there, glowing softly like moving galaxies. When you step back and look at all these forces together, the picture is almost cinematic. The deep sea didn't just allow gigantism, it curated it. Every constraint, every limitation, every harsh condition ended up favoring size, endurance, patience, and calm. Life in the abyss doesn't sprint. It doesn't shout. It doesn't scramble. It expands. It drifts. It persists in bodies that feel like they belong in myths told long after the fire burns low. It's ironic, almost funny, that gigantism, the kind we tend to associate with abundance, thrives best in a place defined by scarcity. The deep sea's emptiness doesn't stifle growth. It nurtures it in the strangest possible way. A creature here doesn't gorge on endless food supplies or bask in sunlight. It survives through efficiency, storage, slowness, and endurance. And yet, those same qualities make giant forms not only possible, but wildly successful. It's like the universe whispered, "Less is more." And the deep sea took that literally, producing creatures so large that they make surface animals look like casual attempts. Darkness plays its part too. Without light, the abyss becomes a blank canvas, freeing evolution from visual expectations. There's no need to maintain complex coloration, no need for decorative displays, no need for sleek outlines. Giants can grow strange, soft, sprawling, or elongated without worrying about aesthetics. When nobody sees you, you can be as large and lumpy as you like. Pressure, often framed as the villain in stories about deep-sea exploration, becomes a sculptor. Instead of flattening life, it shapes it into forms that defy intuition, creatures whose bodies cooperate with compression, not fight it. Giants thrive because they are not rigid, not brittle, not dependent on structures that crumple when the weight of the world literally pushes down on them. And isolation? That's the deep sea's secret innovation lab. Populations drift apart, evolve on their own timelines, and grow into oversized oddities without interference. Islands may produce giant tortoises and oversized birds, but the deep sea, ever the overachiever, produces giants that stretch across the water column and glow softly like living constellations. In the end, gigantism in the deep sea is not one story. It is many. It is pressure and cold, scarcity and stability, isolation and drift, slow growth and oxygen-rich water. It is a symphony of forces so perfectly aligned that giant life isn't an exception, it's the natural outcome. So as we leave this journey into the abyss, picture one of those giants drifting in the dark. A massive, slow-moving creature shaped by millions of years of perfect conditions, a being that proves life doesn't need light or warmth to flourish. It just needs creativity, patience, and an environment that quietly says, "Grow as large as you like. No one's in a hurry down here." In a world built from scarcity, darkness, and pressure, the deep sea somehow wrote a love letter to gigantism, and it signed it with creatures big enough to make the rest of Earth look adorably undersized.